I heard somebody say 90% of the stress that we experience in our life has to do with relationship with other people.
And no doubt about that.
Because if you think about it, even at work, where there's an issue that needs to be resolved, if you're having good communication with your work colleagues and you're working together to try and achieve it, you might not even get to the solution, but the journey is not as tedious or as stressful as if you were all quarreling and fighting, etc.
The question that one should ask themselves is, why was I angry? Not, what did they do to make me angry? What they did, why they did it, leave it to them. That's their choice. My choice should be control.
As a recovered control freak, I've realized that the most important person to control is me.
Well, I wouldn't call you a control freak. You just you like things done in a perfect way, which is not possible because we don't live in a perfect world.
Yeah, but as perfectly as possible. As perfectly as possible.
Hello and welcome, a very warm welcome to you, because this is the first episode of Relationship Real Talk, and it's great to have you here join us.
It's amazing that we're finally here. I mean, we've swum seas, we've climbed mountains, we've gone through a lot to be able to bring this program to you, but we've persevered.
Yes.
We've persevered because we really believe relationships are important. Our whole lives are made up of relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I believe wholeheartedly that God created us to be relational. And if that be true, then it's super important that we master how to build healthy relationships with the people around us, because you can't go far going alone.
Absolutely not. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt, the former president of the United States, that said the single most important ingredient in the formula for success is learning how to get along with others.
Absolutely.
And when you think about it, that is so profound and it's so true, because you cannot do anything by yourself.
You can try. Somebody says if you want to go fast, maybe you can try and go alone. But if you want to go far, go with a crowd, because everybody needs somebody.
Yeah.
So,
And so relationships are important because it empowers us to do more. So if you think about maybe a project you want to achieve, you're going to need people to do it.
Yeah.
In the home, right? If you live in a quote dysfunctional family, it's going to affect how you perform at work. It's going to affect how your kids perform at school. People who have healthy, thriving relationships are healthier. Not only that, they live longer. Who would have thought that?
Well, I think it's very logical, very understandable, because everything affects everything else. So if you have a stressful family where relationships are dysfunctional, it's going to affect how you relate to people outside of the house. It's going to even affect how you drive to work, for a start. It's going to affect the people that you work with, and they're going to have a perspective of you which is not true, but it's because of the stress that you're going through. So when you have a healthy relationship, you're happy at work, you're happy with your neighbor, you're happy internally. And if you're healthy internally, then it will translate to good health and long life and all of that.
I heard somebody say 90% of the stress that we experience in our life has to do with relationship with other people.
And no doubt about that.
Because if you think about it, even at work, where there's an issue that needs to be resolved, if you're having good communication with your work colleagues and you're working together to try and achieve it, you might not even get to the solution, but the journey is not as tedious or as stressful as if you were all quarreling and fighting, etc. So relationships are so important, but we know that they're not always easy. And it could be a relationship in the family or at work or between spouses. Relationship matters because people matter. Life is all about people. So that's why we're really excited to be able to bring this program to you.
And one of the other benefits that we haven't talked about is, when you have a good relationship, it increases or it boosts your self-esteem.
Yep.
Because you feel good about yourself. Why? Because you have a happy environment in your house. But when you're having to struggle in your relationship, you begin to question yourself. You begin to lose confidence in self. And that's going to affect how you portray yourself before other people. And people are going to begin to have a false image of yourself. You don't have a pure image of your own self.
So if you think about maybe a married relationship, so things go sour, what people tend to do is they blame themselves and they think it was probably because there was something wrong with me.
I wasn't good enough.
I wasn't good enough, and even with the children start to think, oh, maybe daddy doesn't love me. Maybe there's something wrong with me. That's why daddy left the house. And so, like you say, it begins to affect your self-esteem when that's not the case at all. So as you can see, if we can do what we need to do to build those healthy relationships, it affects every aspect of our lives. Being the first episode, we thought it'd be good to have a look at some of those things that hinder healthy relationships, what we are calling relationship blockers.
Yeah.
What are some of those relationship blockers, do you think?
We were talking about self-esteem. Let's use that.
Okay.
Low self-esteem is going to affect, your relationship because it is first internal before it is external. If you don't have peace with your oneness, you're not whole in yourself. You don't have a true image of who you are. You are going to struggle with how people deal with you. So it's super important that we have, a good image of ourselves. You are amazing. You are product of a creative mind who created you perfectly well. There is no error in you, but it's a journey to get there.
That is such a valid point you just made, because I heard a quote. I love quotes because I think it just kind of hit the nail on the head by Annie's Nin. And she said, we don't see life as it is. We see life as we are. So you might walk into the room and something is going on. Maybe you walk into a networking room. Let me use that as an example because I go networking a lot. You walk into a networking room and people are busy. Nobody comes to have a conversation with you. And depending on your self-esteem, you can either go, oh, nobody likes me here.
Yeah.
These people are racist. These people are not friendly.
They don't like me.
They don't like me. Or you could think, oh, people are just busy. People are engaged. People are buzzing here. Wow,
maybe I need to engage.
This is a great networking room because everybody's so engaged. Yeah. So the way we see ourselves determines how we see life. And perception is so powerful. Yeah. So going back even further than your self-esteem, I would even take you further to your experiences, your life experiences, your background.
Yeah.
Because if you grew up in a home where you were always affirmed, you were told you were the best thing since sliced bread, you were loved on, then chances of you growing up with self-confidence and high self-esteem is high.
Yeah.
But if you grew up in a home where you were always being told you didn't do anything right, there's something wrong with you, then you grow up with that low self-esteem. And unless you're intentional at some point in your life to deal with that and really find out who you really are, you can take that into a relationship.
Yeah. And that's a valid point. And I'm not going to repeat what you said. I'm just going to jump in and say the fact is most of us have baggages.
That's right.
Our baggages may just be different sizes and different
colors.
Yeah. And I like what I heard somewhere. The fact that you had a terrible background is not a good excuse for you to stay on the ground. Redefine yourself, rediscover yourself, re-educate yourself. Because people can give you the best information they have, but it's wrong information. Reinvent, rediscover yourself. There is greatness on the inside of you. There is happiness on the inside of you. You are not what people have said that you are, that defined your past. It is a struggle, but it's a struggle worth having.
And it starts with awareness. Because if you're going to create any change in your life, you have to be aware of where you are and where you want to go.
Absolutely.
And then you know the gap that you need to close to get from where you are to where you want to go.
Yeah.
So I really think it's so important that we're self-aware. Yeah. We know who we are. We are aware of what's going on in our lives. We're aware of our own emotions, why we respond the way we respond. Some people, for instance, might be in a love relationship and their wife might say something as simple as, please help me take the garbage out. And that will just spark
Right.
It could just trigger something. Why? Because maybe as a child, the mom always used to talk to them in a certain way that they relate that request to that way that the mom used to speak to them. So just being self-aware. Why do I act the way I act? Why do I respond the way I respond?
Yeah, that's
why
very
is that?
good.
Yeah, just asking questions. That why question is so important. Why am I angry about this? Why am I responding that way?
Yeah.
Then you can begin to challenge those behaviors if it does not serve you.
That's a valid point, but the question that one should ask themselves is, why was I angry? Not, what did they do to make me angry? What they did, why they did it, leave it to them. That's their choice. My choice should be controlled. It's not easy. I've been practicing that for a long time. I walk away from a situation that made me angry or a person that makes me angry, and I ask myself, why was I angry? Why? And it sounds harsh, but until you're able to answer that question each time, you're going to repeat the same error again and again. Yeah, and I really think it's even empowering to be able to control yourself, because every time somebody does something and you respond on the basis of what they did, it means you're empowering them and disempowering yourself. Completely agree.
Yeah, and so you always have the reason or the excuse why you're doing something. As a recovered control freak, I've realized that the most important person to control is me. Well, I wouldn't call you a control freak. You just you like things done in a perfect way, which is not possible because we don't live in a perfect world. Yeah, but as perfectly as possible. As perfectly as possible. Yeah. But I've realized that actually the person I need to try and control is me, because if I can control me, then I have real control. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you cannot control anybody else. The mistake people often make is, I will change them. And you can't. You can't control people. You can't change people. So if you can control what you can control, that is you. If you can change what you can change, which is you, then you're really empowered. Yeah. And so when situations come, because people say things like, oh, if only my boss would be more understanding. If only my spouse, my wife or my husband would change. If only my children would be more obedient. If only. But the truth of the matter is, those things might never change. And even if they do, guess what? They will only be replaced by somebody else. So your boss becomes understanding, and then you get a new boss or you get a new job. So you're constantly hoping your life will get better on the basis of other people changing. But when you change and you can control yourself, then you are in control. Irrespective of what's going on. Somebody says nothing changes unless you change. Life has no remote control. That's true. If you want a change, be the change. You want a better relationship, be ready to change. Don't just pray and hope that the other person change. You've got to change. Listen, if you're watching this and you're getting value from it, can you just hit that subscribe button so you can get notified when new episodes drop? And hit the share button. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it with somebody else who you know will benefit from this. And if you have any questions on anything we've talked about so far, or you have a comment, drop it in the comment. We will want to hear from you. But something else that just came to my mind when we're talking about relationship blockers is expectations. Our expectations, because depending again on your experience, you may come into a relationship with certain expectations, right? So maybe your father was the breadwinner, your mother was a housewife. So you come into a relationship expecting that you will be the full-time housewife while your husband will be the full-time breadwinner. And that might not be your husband's expectation. Yeah. It's always very good to discover what works best for you in your relationship, as opposed to importing experiences that may just not be workable in your own relationship. Of course, having a healthy background and memories of what you can import into your relationship could be a great advantage, but you've got to be very careful. This idea of men don't do this or women don't do that. It is men that do this. It is women that do that. Those things are dynamic in every culture, in every season and situations. So you've got to discover your happy place
and explore it.
Yeah.
As opposed to this is how it should be. The fact it was like that for 1,000 years does not mean that that's the best place for it to be. I recall the story about the lady who always chop her bacon, ham, at the two hands, front and back. And the husband was like, why do you do that? And she will go, that's how my mom did it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But it got to a point that I can't stand this. We got to find out. They went to mom, why did you do it? That's how my mom did it. And then they got back to grandma. I did it because my frying pan was small. So she had a good reason. You don't.
Yeah. And like you say, it can work. It could have worked for 1,000 years, but apart from that, it could have worked for 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
We're all different.
Good point.
With relationships, we're all different. So it's so important to communicate the expectations so you can manage the expectations. Yeah. Because they say disappointment is the gap between expectations and reality.
Yeah. There's something that you said. I'm sorry I interrupted you. It's about as expectation as well. We attract what we expect. And so therefore, for example, talking about healthy relationship with people, somebody told you that guy is a horrible guy or that person is a racist person. So you have an expectation that guy is horrible. That guy is racist. So you approach them with those mindset. And guess what? They fulfill prophecy. And then you go, oh yeah, somebody told me. Or maybe fortunately for you, you discover, oh, this guy is not actually racist. So what's the point I'm trying to make? Every information that you have, subjected to reason. Why was I given this information? Question your conclusions so that you can form healthy ones.
Yeah. And going on from expectations is making those assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about relationship blockers, assumptions, they say, are the termites of relationships. Mm-hmm. It just eats at relationships because when you make assumptions, very often when we make assumptions in the first place, they're wrong.
Yeah.
We make wrong assumptions. Like when we met, I remember you said to me, you assumed I would not know how to cook.
Yeah.
And I can get it. It's just because this fine babe, you're like, how can she cook?
I guess you're getting better now.
I always knew how to cook.
Some things.
Everything.
Everything. You could cook everything.
Everything. Guys, don't listen to me. I could cook everything.
Who is the better cook?
Me. Let's ask our children. We'll settle this quarrel. Let's ask our children. But jokes apart.
There's no joke here. I am the better cook.
No, but you said you did not expect me to know how to cook.
That's true.
Why did you have that expectation?
I just made the wrong assumption.
Exactly. You looked at me.
Because of her background and stuff, maybe she wouldn't know how to cook. So
she's fine, babe. She's got, so she's not gonna know how to cook. So if you were that kind of person that you were hung up and you said you were happy to you love me so much, you were happy to just have takeaways.
Yeah.
Or cook.
Yeah.
But if you were that kind of person that my wife cooking for me is really, really important to you, that would have prevented you from even coming to have a conversation.
Yeah, that's true. That's the.
Yeah. So making assumptions can negatively affect relationships. Yeah. So rather than making assumptions, why don't you find out?
Yeah.
Why don't you discover who this person really are?
Yeah.
Right? Rather than looking at, and it could be even at work, like we said, because relationships is not just about love relationships. It could be at work. Yeah. You look at this person, maybe they just started, and you make all these assumptions about them because they don't smile. You have no idea what they're going through that's preventing them from smiling. And then you think they're unfriendly. You just draw conclusions. They're unfriendly, so I'm not going to talk to them. And it just goes downhill from there. Yeah. So I think if you're going to make any assumptions, I say make positive assumptions. Yeah. Yeah. But rather than making assumptions, find out about the person for yourself.
Do your best. I remember working with a guy. I'm going to try not to give too much away, but he would, a very big global company, and the guy would just go crazy sometimes, and he would scream across the desk to somebody. And he never did it to me. Well, maybe towards the end, before I left, he misbehaved one or twice, but he never did it to me. But he would wind me up. Why is he talking to that guy like that? Why is he talking to that guy like that? Well, and then I realized after talking to a few people that his wife was very ill. His wife had cancer, and they said to them she only had a few months to live. And all of a sudden, the guy hasn't changed, but I changed. I was like, oh, because I knew that hurt people. It didn't mean to be rude, but he just can't help himself. But I can help myself now.
Yeah.
So I changed how I dealt with his folly. So yeah, educating yourself, empowering yourself, changing yourself would help you to have a greater relationship.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. We hope you have enjoyed this conversation. We don't want to keep these episodes too long, so we're going to park it there for the moment. I don't think we've exhausted all the relationship
definitely
blockers.
haven't.
But listen, if you know of any relationship blockers, put it in the comments. We would love to hear from you. And maybe we can talk about it on the next episode.
Yeah.
But for now, this has been Mary Enyolu.
And this is me, Julius Enyolu.
On the Relationship Real Talk Show, where we talk all things relationship, always keeping it
real all the time.
Always.